Aisha Kabir, welcome to this program with me, editor of Pratham Alo's English web edition and an observer of Bangladesh politics, society, and of course development progress that Bangladesh has done in so many years. We are at a time when Bangladesh is emerging, bursting on the scene, as it were, 50 years after it attained independence. Uh, and of course, India is one of its closest neighbors as well as friend. How do you see India-Bangladesh relations as they stand today?
Well, as you say today, particularly today with Prime Minister Modi visiting Bangladesh, and you can see the reception he received, definitely relations are good. And they always have been good. There have been ups and downs, definitely. But given our history particularly from 1971 and the liberation war and today, despite the ups and downs, India and Bangladesh have remained firm friends. The friendship has been firmly entrenched. But there have been irritants, there have been ups and downs.
That's true of any family, any friendship that happens. But I mean, like somebody said, that the base is very solid and robust. But going forward, what do you think India and Bangladesh should do more to take it to a next level and make sure that people are also invested in it, not just government to government, but more and more people to people contacts?
That's a good point because, as you said, it's like a family and all, but even a family can break up if it's not taken care of. So, such a close relationship and with so many factors involved, this relationship needs conscious caring for. There's much to be done because the irritants which are there, and people are not going to ignore them. So what can be done is actually to, instead of just giving a rosy picture and say we are the best friends and all, whether it's the government or the civil society, whether it's people-to-people organizations, these irritants which can harm the relationship, these should be actually pinpointed and brought out into the open, identified. There's no harm. Things shouldn't be covered up. So I think if we are open about the problems, that'll
Yes,
lead
always
to solutions.
communication always helps.
Yes.
Open communication helps.
Yes.
But if you can identify a couple of irritants in your view.
Well, in my view, number one, which actually is very hurtful for the people of Bangladesh, is the border killing. I think that's number one. A lot of things have been said. There have been a lot of meetings, and there's been saying that, lethal weapons won't be used at the border and that will be brought down to zero. But the fact remains, almost every day or every week, there have been killings, whether these are innocent farmers, whether they're smugglers, and this is continuing. So this has, really affected the people's sentiments. It hurts the people, not just the borderline people, but the people in general. So that number one is a problem. Sure. Number two is the sharing of river waters. That's a huge thing, particularly if I mention the river Tista. It was almost a done deal. Everything was to be signed until now it's being said because of Mamata, her objections to it, it's not being signed. But promises, but it's not going through. And people find it hard to believe that if the central government really wants it, it's not going to go through, perhaps. But the fact is we need that.
Exactly.
So that is another irritant in the thing.
I can see that. In fact, I was here in 2011 with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
Yes.
When it was supposed to be almost
Absolutely,
signed, and then the last moment Mamata Banerjee backed out. I was here in that trip that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh did. But you're right. I mean, these irritants, if they're not taken care of quickly, then they can fester, and that can lead to unpleasant situations. Really.
And there's one more thing. Since you were in Assam, the citizenship, that's a big issue. That's a big issue because it's created a lot of tension within Bangladesh about Bengali-speaking Muslims being pushed back, whether they're Bangladeshi or not. the fact is there's a fear of another, influx into Bangladesh, as it is we're dealing on one side with the influx of Rohingyas, and on that side, if that comes, we'll be under a lot of pressure. So that has also, generated a bit of animosity or unpleasant feelings.
True, and I think it's good to speak about these because I hope the governments also speak about this to each other.
That is important because the people speak about it and all. The governments need to be open dealing with it. Some ministers from the Indian side had made at that time some unpleasant remarks and all. So these things, I think there's a lot of damage control to be done.
Indeed, in fact, nurturing, as you mentioned, of the relationship is important.
Yes.
It cannot be taken for granted. But as I see it also, that Bangladesh in many ways has got such a great potential now as a nation that is bursting with energy, which got the economy going. And I think the world is looking at Bangladesh in many ways. It's one of the fastest growing economies. As an observer of the social scene in Bangladesh, what do you think are the main aspirations of the younger generation of Bangladeshis? I mean, there was of course the freedom, and then the liberation war, and then there was turmoil and ups and downs, like in any other nation. But now Bangladesh is on the cusp of a transformation, if I can say. So, what do you think is the aspirations?
Well, the aspirations of the young people, I would say, from what I see, from what I observe, is very different from us, who have seen the liberation war, lived through the liberation war, lived through independence, and lived through this gradual building up of the nation. This is a different generation. They see a lot of things in terms of economy, in terms of democracy, in terms of freedom. And while they are patriotic, the people of our country are definitely patriotic, but they don't give so much, perhaps as we were invested in nationalism and all, such emotion and national. Yes. They are patriotic, but they're less emotion about it, and they see more about the individual gains and about the nation too. So they aspire to see a free, prosperous country, not just in terms and financial terms or economic terms, but they also value their freedom of expression, of democracy in a true sense, and they want to see Bangladesh, as a prosperous country, a country which the world
which has an open society, perhaps.
Absolutely,
like that. But in that sense, again, work has to be done, like in every other country globally. I mean, it's a strong statement to make, perhaps, that a lot of people think democracy is in retreat, which I think is exaggerated, really. But because of the nature of our mediums of expression and the platforms of expression, a lot of misinformation, disinformation also happens. As an editor of an online portal, do you come across this challenge about disinformation, misinformation?
Absolutely. Fake news.
Exactly.
Fake news. Absolutely. It's especially today. It's such a big challenge for us because it's so tempting when you get some news and it seems so genuine, but we don't. We have to just resist that temptation because this is the age of information, but it's also the age of misinformation. And with social media out there, this misinformation is growing. But I would say fake news, misinformation is also a blessing in disguise for us in the mainstream media, because at one time we were worried that is the mainstream media going to survive? What with everything is available on social media, everyone is tweeting on Facebook, on Instagram. But nowadays when people see that a lot of this news isn't true or isn't genuine, when there's any sensational breaking news, what do? They turn to, if it's in Bangladesh, to Pratham or the Daily Star or some reliable newspapers. Same, I'm sure, in India or any place in the world. So we found out it's doing us a service in the sense that now people have started turning back to the mainstream media for reliable news. And we in the mainstream media, we have to resist the temptation of breaking news, because breaking news is always out there. We have to be more into genuine news, in-depth analysis, giving the people the truth.
Correct. Checking, cross-checking, double-checking. the old rules are making a comeback in that sense in the mainstream media.
Absolutely.
And I think this is all good for the people also, because otherwise they get swayed by fake news or
Absolutely.
but as again a young nation like Bangladesh, I mean India is 75 years old, almost 75 years old. Bangladesh is 50 years old. Um, the growth of media in Bangladesh has also been tremendous from what one has been watching. I think there are 10, 12 electronic media, television stations.
Yes.
There are so many newspapers.
Online
Online
portals.
portals.
Yes.
Do young people take career in media also seriously? Are they aspiring for it?
Yes and no.
Okay. Okay.
There's a big difference before, like when we were young and journalists, we were struggling journalists. There was no money in journalism
Exactly.
then, but so anybody who was in journalism was a dedicated journalist, was out of passion, out of commitment. It's changing now. They're paid much well. We see young journalists with cars and houses and all, which is good. It's not a bad thing. It's definitely a good thing. I don't think it's the financial benefits that's discouraging them or anything. It's more like they might feel restrained, perhaps. There's a matter of freedom of expression, freedom of the media, which perhaps isn't quite what it should be. So young people might feel frustrated. The older generation journalists, we are perhaps learning not self-censorship, but to live with it, willing to take risks. Now the young people willing to take risks, because journalism definitely, in not just in South Asia, I think in many parts of the world, is a bit of a risky business
Profession,
if
yes.
you want to be really a professional. So are they willing to take risks? There are people who do want to take risks, but I wouldn't say it's like before.
So the passion, it's more a profession rather than passion now.
Right, and the whole the whole concept of media is changing.
Exactly. So that also brings me to what generally happens in South Asia about the relationship between the people in power and the media. Everywhere there is a tension, and which is a healthy tension if it is seen in the proper context. But in that sense, the challenges to media have also risen.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? As an editor, how would you deal with that?
That's a difficult challenge to deal with, to tell the truth. The thing is, most good newspapers, I would say, tend to be anti-establishment. It's not that they're anti-government or anything, but I think for a flourishing democracy, even for good governance, it's good to have free media, a strong free media, not just being anti-establishment for the sake of being anti-establishment. And especially in countries like, say, I'll give Bangladesh for example, in our parliament, the opposition is, we don't have a strong opposition right now. The opposition to Awami League is considered to be BNP, but BNP has become a very weak opposition. They've got no voice in parliament or outside parliament. So in that sense, I would say that the media could be an alternative to that, which would be...
Or at least the voice of the people.
Voice of the people, critical of the government, constructive criticism, I could say too,
Correct.
not just for the sake of criticism, voice of the people. So the media has a role there. And even if we do say that, yes, we are being suppressed, and I'm not saying that we aren't being suppressed, but if we're going to stay in the media, we have to learn to live with it and go ahead.
Yes.
And I'm proud to say that the paper where I work for, Prathamalo, despite all odds, we are managing to as much as we can.
It's very good to know, and I think on that note, I must thank you for your time and being so candid about all of these issues. It's always tough to be a journalist in a place which is emotional, high-strung people. South Asians tend to be that.
It's rewarding too.
It's rewarding
exciting
too. It's
too.
exciting. I can vouch for that. So, pleasure talking to you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.